Happy Friday. Sorry, there hasn't been a video out in a while, but I've been working on a lot of stuff to try and get ready for Dragon Con, which is next week. We leave Wednesday. So anybody that's never been to Dragon Con or doesn't know anything about Dragon Con is in Atlanta. And Atlanta city traffic is amazing. It's easily one of my favorite things in the whole world. You're bumper to bumper traffic doing like 80 miles an hour, and there's these huge retaining walls on either side of the highway, like 5 or 6 lanes. It's just crazy. One person makes a mistake and everybody dies. It's just nuts. It makes me feel kind of like a fighter pilot flying an X-wing fighter or a TIE fighter or something like that. It's so amazing and astounding. But every good fighter pilot needs an Astro-mech. And so, BB-8 is going to Dragon Con with us. My son picked this BB-8 head up, God only knows where, as my son is wont to do. And when my wife and I were talking about making some sort of cover so that our kit and gear was mostly weatherproof and out of prying eyes and rest stops and gas stations and stuff like that, I decided that that would be a wonderful opportunity to implement something that I could bolt BB-8 to. And he's got a couple of supporting braces on the inside, and there's a hole that runs through the top of the cover, and BB-8 bolts to the cover. And so now BB-8 gets to go to Dragon Con as our Astro-mech. So I used a couple of pieces of angle that I had and measured the distance between the two. Once I had that distance measured, I cut 2 pieces or 1 piece of 1-inch square stock to the appropriate dimension, and then did a real quick test fit to make sure that it fit, and well, it did. Once I had that piece test fit, I cut the second piece. These will be the 2 pieces that join together the 2 halves of the cover. Then measured the length of the bed rails to know how long I needed the sides, set the table saw to 45-degree angle, and started the cuts. Once I had all the angles cut, I put them in place on the truck and made sure that everything fit appropriately the way they were supposed to. And, well, the edges line up nice and neat and clean, so I was good to go. Measured the length of the bed so that I could cut the center sections out where they would fold. Then, once I had that done, I cut the one side out and then clamped the 2 pieces together, the 2 sides together, and cut them equally so that I was sure that they were square. I now had 2 slightly smaller rectangles, clamped the pieces in the square vise, and tack welded or TIG welded the pieces together. I did the 2 front angles, then the 2 back angles, checking, of course, to make sure that everything was nice and square. Then welded them all together and ground the surfaces where they would sit against the rails and on top nice and smooth. Took a piece of aluminum continuous hinge that I had picked out that I was going to use for Mandalorian accessories, but instead it got earmarked for this project, and drilled holes alternating on both sides, and then ground the burrs off the holes so that the rivets would fit nice and smooth together. Once I had the rectangles laid out and welded together, I laid it on a sheet of 16 gauge aluminum and traced out the corner. And it was at that time that I realized I sort of needed to have center sections. So I measured and cut center sections out, figured out approximately where they needed to be, and set them in their square. Once I had them set in their square, I realized that I needed to grind the edges, so I took them out. And then I ground the bevels nice and deep so that I have a lot of metal left over when I finish grinding. Put them back in, squared them up, and then TIG welded them. Once I had the center sections and everything ticked together, I ground everything nice and smooth again. Then cut out some sections of 2-inch pieces of bar stock from some flat bar that I had. These are going to make the tabs that hold the thing in place. Once I had that done, I cut out the panels that would actually end up being the outside top panels out of the 16 gauge aluminum using the sheet metal shear. And be careful, these things will get you. Ah! Drilled some holes in the flat bar. I drilled 8 of them with little holes and 8 of them with big holes. The big holes then got the 1/4x20 nut certs, and eventually I'm going to get knurled nuts or thumb nuts or something like that, some sort of with a handle on them, so I can not need a tool to do this. Then clamped the tabs to the thing, squared them up, and welded those on too. Once I had everything welded together, cleaned up, I wiped everything down with acetone and then used some SEM panel bond adhesive that's supposed to be designed for bonding aluminum together. Now I'm going to rivet these things together as well because one of my fears is in aforementioned 90 mile an hour Atlanta traffic, a piece of sheet metal goes flying off and cuts somebody's head off. So I used a combination of the panel bond and rivets, and you'll see the rivets later. Got one panel in place, wiped it clean, laid some paper on top of the other one, and then put the other panel together upside down so that I could use the 2 panels to clamp each other together. Wiped it down with acetone, applied some more SEM adhesive, and then proceeded to clamp with every clamp and vice grip and everything of any sort of reasonable size I had in my garage. And then I let it sit overnight. Wiped everything off with acetone as best I could, and then ground the edges so that they were nice and smooth with the pieces of angle and bar stock that I used. There would no overhanging edges, and then went through and sanded everything down nice and neat with the DA. Took a large block sander that I had, put some paper on it, and just scuffed that entire panel up. And I actually did both of them, but I think I only showed one of them. Scuff that entire panel up. This isn't to block or smooth anything out. This is basically just to scuff it up and give it some mechanical adhesion. Then sprayed everything down with alcohol and wiped it off real good. Unfortunately, I forgot to film the actual installation of the rivets, but I drilled a whole bunch of holes all the way around, and then basically riveted the entire panel together, as well as the panel bonding adhesive. Took a couple of packages of weather stripping that I picked up at Lowe's. I think they're automotive weather stripping. It worked a couple bucks. And put a bead of weather stripping around the outside edge, or I tried. And take 2. Third time's the charm. So I took everything out to the truck, clamped the hinge in place, drilled the outside holes on both sides, the top and the bottom, and then test fitted everything to make sure that everything still functioned. It opened and closed the way it was supposed to, and it did. So at that point in time, I drilled the entire rest of the hinge, both top and bottom, riveted together, and had a couple that the rivet things broke, and so I had to whiz wheel them off. wiped everything down one last time, and then took a section of pipe repair tape. This stuff's waterproof and supposed to be good for that. Stretched it over the hinge, hoping to get a little bit of waterproofing, and sprayed it with some Rust-Oleum just because I wanted to see if it would stick. I don't know if it'll stick. Then had some leftover exterior grade black that we used for my son's senior project when we made him his TIE Fighter desk. The thing's been sitting on the shelf for a few years, so I figured it'd be a good use, and I put 3 or 4 good coats of the exterior grade on there, let it dry, and picked everything up, took it out to the truck, secured it in place, and there we have it.